Beneath the winding ravines and canyons it's dark and damp. The huge pipes are transporting industrial wastewater recklessly, filling and polluting the place. Accompanied by the rancid smell of the underground ditch, in this harsh environment, there is a giant steel beast sitting. Rusty, haze lingered, green alchemical gas was continuously ejected from its body. It was a clay pot that stood on top of the factory. In this underground city with a strange scene, outside a shop called the Old Zhoulang Repair Shop, a young man in a robe made of flax silk is holding a wrench covered with oil, bowing his head and fiddling in front of him. Huge mechanical swing arm. 3 strange glass tubes, filled with dark green liquid, were inserted into the central slot of the metal swing arm. Accompanied by the boy's constant fiddling, the bubbles in the glass tube rose, and the faint green liquid also boiled, and the color gradually changed from green to red, like blood that was boiled and burned. Seeing this, the young man took 2 steps back vigilantly, then narrowed his eyes and looked at the metal swing arm in front of him. The swing arm, which was half the size of his body, twitched on his own under the burning of the red liquid. Under the rattling voice, the young man let out a laugh and then reached out to wipe the sweat on his forehead. Well, it looks like it can still be repaired, but can it be broken like this? No, he has to pay me more. A small Boer medal is about 7 copper coins. So, at least I have to add 10 copper coins. I don't want to cheat him, plus the time cost of buying metal, why should I add 2 more coppers? Lin Wen touched the center of the swing arm with the toe of his shoe, followed by the leather boots on the red button in the center of the swing arm. The air bubbles in the glass tube dissipated, and the color of the liquid changed from red to green. Then, the huge metal swinging arm quieted down. Lin Wen stretched out his hand, lifted the huge metal swing arm easily with one hand, and walked into the Zhoulang repair shop. Stinky boy, how many times have I told you, you are not allowed to take over private work without my consent? Aren't you afraid that this will cause you trouble? How many times have I told you, those bastards, gangsters, you are not allowed to take over the life of a member? Lin Wenke walked into the store with his gloves, and in front of him, there was a clanging sound, as if walking out of a pile of iron. A thin middle-aged man with an unpleasant smell appeared in front of Lin Wen. It was the smell of engine oil, and it was accompanied by the metallic smell of burning iron filings. Walking straight to the cashier desk, he first saw a pile of rubbish placed on the desk, and then he pushed them all down in anger. Take it easy, Zhoulang, those you lost are all my treasures. Lin Wen shouted in dissatisfaction. Shut up, you bastard, you troublemaker, you idiot, pig, you filthy and stinky worm, you only know how to eat solitary rock. He didn't stop talking, he kept saying dirty words to Lin Wen. Seeing this, Lin Wen ignored old Zhoulang and walked into a room. Lin Wen first hung the metal swinging fist on the wall, then Lin Wen walked out of the room, looked at old Zhoulang, and said aloud, for repairing this glove, I can receive a total of 1 silver coin and 20 copper coins. It's a good price. Old Zhoulang, who was still scolding Lin Wen, suddenly changed his attitude and nodded while touching his chin. I can give you 50 copper coins, and the rest will go to you. Lin Wen said tentatively. Go away. I have raised you and taught you for 5 years? You still dare to bargain with me? Your stinky skin is itchy again, isn't it? Zhoulang growled loudly again when he heard the sound, and even grabbed it. He took a heavy object in front of him and threw it straight at Lin Wen. Seeing this, Lin Wen pouted and ducked away easily, then stretched out his hands to face Zhoulang, each hand holding up 4 fingers. Lin Wen continued, Okay, then in order to thank you old Zhoulang for your kindness of upbringing, then I'll give you 80 coppers. No, brat, I want that silver coin. Haha, you are such a greedy old guy. To each other, you stinky brat. Seeing Lin Wen standing there and scratching his head depressed, old Sorer laughed out loud as if he had won a victory. Lin Wen didn't resist either. 1 silver coin is just 1 silver coin. Although old Zhou was a little irritable and a little greedy. But Lin Wen knew how good he was to Lin Wen. Old Zhou was just a guy who was not good at expressing himself. The reason why he asked for a silver coin was very clear to Lin Wen. It was because of the rules. As an apprentice, Lin Wen took over the work of the gang members without authorization. The other party said that he would give a silver coin. It is a question whether he will really give it at that time, but if old Zhou intervenes in this matter, then the matter it can be different, then it becomes that Lin Wen is instructed by the old Zhou to take over the work. If the other party refuses to pay at that time, then the old Zhou can come forward. In this dark street, old Zhou is also a ruthless character. Otherwise, how could it be possible to open a repair shop in such a place? By the way, Vander is looking for you. After laughing for a while, Zhou suddenly became serious again. He looked at Lin Wen and muttered, "You must have made another mistake, right? Lin Wen Laurent, I have warned you countless times, you are not allowed to mix with the children in his tavern, you must know that you are different from them." Of course I know. Here again, old Zhuolang's familiar set. Lin Wen lowered his head, picked up the rubbish that Zhou had swept away earlier, and said, "Because they have no brains, they only have fists, but I'm different, I'm a brainy person, and I'm very smart. So if I have a chance, I can try to climb to the Golden City, and I can get away from this gutter that is covered with haze and bottomless black. I can no longer be called a ditch rat by the people in Shangcheng, but become a master. I can also wear leather skirts and boots, like a nobleman. In that case, you, my adoptive father, can also be exposed. And their future can only be to be a gang member in the lower city, or to be a drug dealer, doing those dangerous jobs. If they want better, they will get to the upper city's wharf to be a sweaty worker, but we must learn to tolerate the discriminatory eyes and words of Pichin people." "Enough, Zhou, you have told me this statement countless times, and I have answered you countless times." Lin Wen rolled his eyes and packed his baby in a sack. "Is it Shangcheng?" When he first came to this world, Lin Wen was full of rejection of the environment of the bottom city, and yearned for the upper city. It's bright, safe, and the air is fresh. Everything is great and free. It is full of academic atmosphere and thriving. And what about the bottom city? The poisonous green alchemy gas fills the whole city. It is dark and humid here, and people breathe the poisonous gas full of metal particles every day. There is absolutely no comparison with life in the upper city. But that was Lin Wen's idea 5 years ago. Why did this happen to Zan? It is not caused by the Great Pichin. The current Lin Wen, he likes it very much. Although it has always been shrouded in smog, Lin Wen believes that the bustling here is not allowed to go to the city. The residents here are all-encompassing and culturally splendid. Lin Wen accepted it. And here he is now accepted. But you have to know that I'm doing it for your own good. Zhou said dissatisfiedly. Yes, are you finished talking about the old thing? I'm leaving after that. Lin Wen clicked his tongue, put on the sack, turned around and pushed open the iron fence. Old Zhou looked at Lin Wen's back as he walked out, and cursed angrily, "You who doesn't know what's right or wrong. You'll be your ground mouse in this ditch for the rest of your life." Lin Wen waved his hand and quickly disappeared into the thick haze. In the shop, after Lin Wen left, old Zhou, who was still furious before, suddenly smiled. It was a very happy smile. "If I leave, what will you do with this old man? You have no children and no daughters, and I am the only apprentice. Do you still expect someone to give you old age when you are old? It would be good if the people here don't come to rob you. Now, let alone if I leave, no one will know that you died in the store that day. Someone has to collect the body for you, right? Moreover, I don't know the good and the bad, I'm a Zan." In the deep trenches of Zan, Lin Wenzheng lowered the brim of his hat with his hands, lowered his head, and walked down the street with his body down. In Zan's ditch, the smog was constantly around him, but in the past, Lin Wen would feel his lungs burning when he even breathed, and the strong foreign body sensation was very disgusting. But now, he could actually endure the haze entering his body. It can be seen how strong people's adaptability is. Now, the visibility in front of me is very low, only 5 meters away, but this is not a problem for Lin Wen, who has lived here for 5 years. 10 minutes later, Lin Wen walked to a tavern called Fujian and pushed open the door of the tavern. When he entered the door, he took off his hat first, and after the people who had entered the tavern because of him suddenly saw his face, everyone in the tavern silently withdrew their gazes and drank the wine hilariously. Lin Wen, this way. In the bar not far away, a man as strong as a bear put down his wine glass and waved to Lin Wen. Lin Wen walked up and sat on the stool in front of the bar. Seeing this, a young man with bizarre tattoos on his face and mohawk hair saw this. After Fender nodded, he first respected Lin Wen. He nodded, then picked up the glass and walked aside. You came here this time, old Zhou should scold you again, right? Of course, after all, he has already sucked smog and sucked stupid. You know Vander, the smog is poisonous. If you smoke too much, you will not only be stupid, but your temper will become more and more irritable. The person in front of him nodded with a gentle smile, and then said, bowing his head to find something, is it still the same? Yes, after all, I'm only 15 years old now, so I don't care about alcohol or anything. Lin Wen nodded. Hey, you kid, you must know that Wei started drinking when she was 10 years old. Of course, she doesn't actually drink, but seeing us adults always drinking, probably thinks that drinking is a symbol of adults, but she just took a sip and spit it out. You have told me this story no less than 7 times. Vander shrugged indifferently, when you're old, you like to repeat things. He lowered his body and took out a bottle, opened it, and poured out the juice for bartending. Vander, what are you looking for from me? Lin Wen took the cup handed by Vander and sipped it. Vander looked around, put away his smile, and put his hands on the bar. He looked down at Lin Wen and whispered, there are 2 things. Tell me, I'll think about it. Lin Wen narrowed his eyes, seeing Vander like this. Of course Lin Wen knew that it was a big deal. Of course, it is not a trivial matter that can make the people in charge of Haixiang so vigilant. The actual controller of Zan is the moderate-looking middle-aged man in front of him. In this regard, Lin Wen has a headache. He remembered. In the original background story, there was no such person, right? The first thing, Lin Wen, just after my people handed over the news, there was an explosion in the noble district of the upper city. The explosion destroyed a room and caused the whole building to be turbulent. Although now the specific cause of the explosion has not yet been found, but the surrounding residents were also forced to move out of the vicinity. Lin Wen nodded. The perpetrators of this explosion are 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Vander's tone was low. Lin Wen held up the cup and looked at Fender with a headache. The latter also looked at him with a sad expression. Lin Wen sighed and said, okay, I already know who they are. So what's the second thing you want to say? Fender straightened up and said complicatedly, of course I want you to help me watch them. They depend on you very much, so they will definitely come to you as soon as something goes wrong. Fender said, there was still a little frustration. Compared to his adoptive father, is Lin Wen, the elder brother, more trustworthy? But it doesn't matter now. Vander continued, something happened to the people in the upper city, and it's still in, a big family, Lin Wen, with your mind, of course you know what will happen next. Dead. A building was destroyed, what do you think? It's a bit difficult to do. Father Fender, you can't solve this matter, you ask me to solve it. Lin Wen looked at Fender with a headache. I'm just a 15-year-old. Enough, it's okay for you and old Zhou to say this, but you still have to say this in front of me? Besides, do you really think that old Zhou doesn't know about you? He just pretended not to know on purpose. Lin Wen gave Lin Wen a blank look. In short, Wei and the others will be handed over to you. Fandel said without doubt, took out a bag, he opened it, and it contained a lot of silver coins, and handed it to Lin Wen. He said, "This is yours. Reward." Lin Wen's eyes lit up, took a bag of silver coins, and nodded to Fender. "Okay, I see. Then there is nothing else, right?" "No, now look at the time, they are almost coming back." Lin Wen nodded and drank the juice from the glass in one gulp. "I'll go pick them up now." But Vander, what are you going to do with the magistrate?" Vander was silent for a moment, then waved his hand. "Don't worry, I will deal with it." Lin Wen said nothing, got up and walked out of the tavern. Soon, Lin Wen disappeared into the haze. "Damn, damn, damn! Boom, look at what you've done! How can you, how can you?" Beside the foul-smelling ditch, 4 children, one fat and one thin, one tall and one short, fell on a pile of rubbish. The thin teenager spat out something in his mouth, wiped the corners of his mouth, and said angrily, "I told you not to bring her, but you just don't listen. Look, it exploded, it exploded. We almost exploded. They're all dead. It's not my problem, I didn't do anything." Accompanied by the angry accusation of the skinny monkey, the little blue-haired girl beside her said dissatisfiedly, "You didn't do anything? If it wasn't because of you, how could it explode? It was an explosion. Damn, the magistrate will definitely find it, when you..." "Enough, Milo!" The girl walking in front suddenly shouted. "Yeah, Milo, at least we got a good harvest this time." On the side, the tall and fat young man hesitated and said aloud. Seeing the attitudes of these two people, Thin Monkey immediately became discouraged, and said helplessly, Forget it, Craig, Wei, you can spoil it." Slightly. The little girl called Bang Bang hid behind the tall girl, showing a cute face and grimacing. "You. Miro. Okay, okay, I won't say it, I won't say it." Milo raised his hands and snorted. "Wei, are we going there now?" Craig looked at Wei, "Want to go back to Vandernair?" "No, there is such a big commotion in Shangcheng, Vander will definitely tell us." The pink-haired girl sniffed and said, "Let's go to Lin Wen's place." Craig nodded, and on the side, the skinny monkey Milo also nodded. "Wei, are we going to find brother Lin Wen?" Next to his legs, he looked up at Wei and said excitedly. "Of course." Wei said with a smile, "If something goes wrong, Lin Wen will help us settle it." The group immediately acted and walked towards the ground. "But Wei, we always trouble big brother Lin Wen like this," Clegg suddenly said on the way. Wei knew what Craig wanted to say, so he shrugged and said with a smile, "He won't bother us." "That's right, Craig, you guy, we are family." Milo called again. "I just think, Craig wanted to explain, but Wei suddenly raised his hand and looked forward vigilantly. "Yo, who is this? Isn't this the famous Violet in our Forgan Tavern?" 5 people appeared in front, one of them had yellow hair and was standing there looking at Wei. "I just got the news that there seems to be an explosion in Shangcheng." "Well, I've heard of it, you just told me this." Wei and Clegg walked over, Wei even spread out his hands and said nonchalantly. But after getting close, Huang Mao stretched out his hand to stop a few people. He said, "Do you still know? I heard that the explosion was caused by 4 children. Hey, why are you 4? What on earth are you trying to say?" Wei stopped and looked straight at him. "It's nothing, it's just to see how well you harvested. If you're willing to." Wei was always expressionless when he heard this, but he put his hands behind his back and made a gesture to Craig and Milo behind him. Craig and Milo nodded, and Bakubo no longer pestered Wei, but took something from Craig's hand. It was a big package full of the results of their crimes. Wei clenched his fists. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Craig and Milo also made a gesture, and the three were ready to fight, but soon, Wei in the front let go and grinned. Laughed. What are you laughing at? Huang Mao was a little puzzled, but she saw Wei raised her hand, beckoning behind him, and she shouted with a smile on her face, "Why did you come here? Did Fender ask you to come?" Huang Mao immediately turned his head, but just as he turned around, his whole body bent into a prawn and flew straight upside down. The moment he flew out, he vaguely saw that his companions were all lying on the ground, rolling their eyes and foaming at the mouth. As for the person who kicked him, before he fainted, he also saw the other person's dress. It was a man in a white linen robe with a hat covering his face. He was not tall and looked a little thin. When someone came to take off the brim, it was a young man with a handsome face. "You four guys." Lin Wen looked at Craig and Milo, who were looking at him excitedly, and the idea of having a lesson from these people also dissipated. Well, why did they do this? Lin Wen looked at Wei in front of him and could probably think of it. "Follow me." Lin Wen stretched out his hand and picked up Bang Bang, who was running in front of him, turned around and walked. And Wei also ran over immediately and followed Lin Wen closely. Milo patted Craig on the shoulder and said to him, "Look, you still think Brother Lin Wen will find us troublesome? You bastard, apologize to Brother Lin Wen." "I didn't, I just thought, we shouldn't always bother Brother Lin Wen like this." Soon, the five people disappeared into the sewer. A place in the ditch, in a dilapidated tin square house, except for the people from Vander, no one dared to come to this place in Heixiang. No, it should be said that even Vander's people would not dare to trespass here unless they received orders from Vander. In the room, Lin Wen first touched his pocket, took out a few pieces of roasted and fragrant jerky, and handed it to the four of them. Then he sat on the shabby but clean sofa and looked at them. Wen Chen said in a deep voice, "Okay, let's talk about the reason for the explosion. Big brother, it's all an explosion problem. I don't know what she did to cause the explosion. My Roman threw the pot to the explosion. I didn't. Brother Lin Wen, I really didn't do anything. I didn't know what was going on, and then it exploded." Bang Bang immediately explained with dissatisfaction. After speaking, she looked at Lin Wen, a pair of the blue jewel-like eyes blinked. She really didn't know the reason for the explosion, she just remembered hearing the sound of something falling to the ground, and then it seemed to explode. But the situation at the time was so critical that they were almost caught. She had time to see what it was? "Okay, of course I believe you." Lin Wen stretched out his hand and touched Bang Bang's head, who immediately nodded meekly, lowered his head and started to eat. Craig remained silent. Milo kept chattering, but his mouth was broken, and he couldn't say what he wanted to say. Wei sat there angrily, listening impatiently to Milo complaining about the explosion. Seeing this, Lin Wen stretched out his hand and gestured to Wei, "Forget it, Wei, come out with me." Wei, who was sitting on the stool, nodded. She seemed to have guessed what Lin Wen would say. She first raised her eyebrows at Craig and Milo, opened her mouth and pointed at the back of Lin Wen walking out. "It seems to be saying, look, Lin Wen is here again, fan of the head of this family." Milo almost laughed, but fortunately, Craig, who was beside him, gave him a moment in time, which allowed Milo to calm down. After Wei followed Lin Wen out, Milo couldn't bear it anymore, and laughed loudly. "We're right, Brother Lin Wen is not so much our brother, but our father, he is more than Fender. The tube is wide." "Craig, what do you think Big Brother would say about Wei? Will he teach Wei a lesson? After all, this time is not a trivial matter." It was an explosion, an explosion. Milo nibbled at Lin Wen's roasted jerky. Lin Wen felt safer than Vander's. At this moment, he was completely relaxed. Sometimes, he really thinks that Brother Lin Wen has surpassed Vander, but he is just Loki. Brother Lin Wen won't teach Wei a lesson. Bang Bang immediately expressed his dissatisfaction. Do you think Brother Lin Wen is the same as you? He's not like you, a brat who can only complain. Yes, yes. But Bang Bang, you are the stinky brat. Milo said indifferently. Violet, what did you guys do in Shangcheng today? After closing the oil-stained iron door, Lin Wen turned around and looked at Wei with an excited face in front of him. He felt a bit of a headache. At this moment, Wei was pursing her thin lips and raising her heroic eyebrows, looking very proud. It was like asking Lin Wen for credit. Did she think she did it right? Lin Wen looked at her and laughed angrily. I still remember when I saw Wei for the first time. She looked at her own expression with disdain. No, it should be said that Wei looks at everyone with the same expression. It is really a small thorn, and it is rebellious in her bones, rebellious to the point of lawlessness. After all, many times, Zan's words and affairs are beyond her control. As for Lin Wen, after seeing Wei, Lin Wenke really believed that he had crossed into the game world. It's so interesting. Who would have thought that staying up all night at home to get points, but getting a gold one will pass through? When it comes to the candidates for crossing, shouldn't we choose those guys who are the kings and the first ones in the canyon? How can he be a late-stage cancer who got gold? And what made Lin Wen even more outrageous was Wei and Jinx, the happy friends, turned out to be sisters. Ha, did you have this statement when you first read the Fist story? At most, Six and Jinx grew up in the same orphanage, right? Even if someone said that the two might be sisters, the Fist has not confirmed it. Well now, the two are not only sisters, but also the adopted daughters of Zan Boss Vander. This is even more outrageous. Because, there is no such person as Vander in the original background story. It can be seen that the Fist is eating the book again. But it's not a matter of a day or two for Fists to eat books. As a fan of the Alliance, Urgot tells stories, and Lin Wen can be said to read it regularly. Although he can't write down all of them, he is famous for his favorite hero stories. Lin Wen has generally memorized it. As for Milo and Craig, Lin Wen was even more speechless. At first, Lin Wen almost thought that Clegg was Ezreal when he was a child. After all, this guy wore an adventurer's glasses and looked like a fat version of Ezreal, but after thinking about it, Lin Wen I think too much. Ezreal is a rich second generation, and his family is a high-ranking person. He was born in a noble family in Piltover. How could he become Weeha's explosive child? Because of this, it only took a few months for Lin Wen to discard the arrogant thoughts brought by his past life memories. Because this is not a game, this is the real world. In the third year of coming to this world, Lin Wen knew a lot of things. For example, the division of strength. Heroes like Wei and Jinx are, to put it bluntly, better than ordinary people, and even after the addition of alchemy technology and hex technology in the future, they are still at the stage of mortals. Another example is Vander, the talker, who is also in the category of ordinary people. Without wearing technical gloves, Vander can't even break boulders with his physical body, and his speed is not much faster than ordinary people. But even Vander like this has become a strongman who controls the underground of Zan. And Jinx, who is very popular in the game, she is still a helpless little girl. That's right, the 8-year-old girl with short blue hair who is sitting in the room now is the madman who will make a riot in Piltover in the future Jinx. But now, Lin Wen is unable to associate Bakuba with Jinx no matter what. Because that's just a cute, somewhat naughty little girl. But the way in front of her is very similar to what Lin Wen has seen in the game. She has the iconic pink hair, except that she does not have the iconic 6 tattoo on her face, and her body has not grown and has no nose studs. This girl is very similar to Wei in the original painting. When Lin Wen asked, Wei didn't hide it, and immediately told Lin Wen what he had done with his partner in Shangcheng in the morning. Then, Wei saw that Lin Wen's face was getting darker and darker. Do you know what you have done? Of course I know what I've done, Lin Wen, I rubbed the spirits of those people from the upper city. I let them know that the people from the bottom city are not easy to mess with. Lin Wen sighed, looked into her eyes and said, Wei, I know you hate Pigeon people, and I don't like Pigeon people, but Wei, can you bear the consequences of angering Pigeon people? What can they do? Can they still come to Daiken to arrest me? If they dare to come, we'll just drive them back. Lin Wen Laurent, Zan is the Zan of our Zan people, not the punks. Zan. Violet. Seeing Wei's indifferent appearance, Lin Wen raised his voice displeased. Wei in front of him was startled, but quickly looked at Lin Wen unconvinced, stubbornly poking his head, but kept silent. You don't even know what you've done. Do you think this is the same as what you have done before? In this incident, it died, and it is likely that the nobles of Pigeon died. When they died, the magistrates must give the nobles an explanation. When they come down to the ditch to ask for someone, what do you ask Vander to do? The big deal is to fight them. Wei said angrily, this is our territory, we can make our own decisions, and we should make our own decisions. Lin Wen looked at Wei with a headache, nonsense. You know, that will kill a lot of people. What do we use to resist the magistrates in Piedmont? They have people, money, guns, and everything, and what about us? Lin Wen said, and stretched out his hand to grab Wei, grabbed her hand and lifted it hard, but when Lin Wen looked at the strip of cloth that was infected with blood and wrapped around Wei's finger, he felt a stab in his heart, and his strength was strong. He received a lot of money immediately, but he still said in a serious tone, is this just based on this? Do you rely on this to win the Pigeon people? Wei retorted vigorously, withdrew his hand and said, I'm not afraid of death. Lin Wen looked at Wei in front of him and laughed angrily. Sure enough, she was still a yellow-haired girl. After careful calculation, Wei in front of her was actually only 13 years old. 13 years old. At this age, she shouldn't endure so much. She is now a reckless yellow-haired girl who only thinks about using her fists to solve the problem. Yes, of course fists can solve the problem. As long as the fist is big enough. But is Six's fist big enough? Obviously, Wei does not have that strength now, not only Wei, but also Vander, and the entire Zan combined, has not resisted Pigeon's strength. This is a stupid girl. Thinking of this, Lin Wen's tone relaxed a bit, but what about Burst? What about Milo? Craig and the others? Wei, I believe you are not afraid of death, but what about them? Have you thought about them well? Yes, they take you as their boss, they listen to you very much, they will do whatever you ask them to do. Today you ask them to go to the Fried Leather City, tomorrow you ask them to follow you to the Gate of the Sun and they will take care of you too. Yes, but have you thought about them? Have you considered that if they have an accident, can you really bear the consequences? Can you accept them leaving you? Wei, the word boss is not so easy to bear. These two words carry responsibility. They call you the boss and entrust your life to you. You should know the weight of it. You can't be like this all the time. Anything can only be solved with fists. Me. Seeing that Wei's tone was a little more relaxed, and he was no longer the one who refused to admit defeat, Lin Wen sighed and said, Wei, you must think twice about anything you do, I have told you many times, you are allowed to go to Pigeon, but you just won't listen. I'm just not convinced. Why can't the people from the lower city go to the upper city, but the people from the upper city can come down the city casually? Even the dance corridor is like this. The people from Pigeon looked at us like they were watching animals. Look at the bastard, I'm not convinced, I want to change everything. Wei retorted Lin Wen loudly. I know it all. 13-year-old Wei, no matter how strong he was, felt wronged at this time. Lin Wen knew why Wei hated the people of Shangcheng. Lin Wen heard about it from Vander. Wei and Bakuba's parents died in the protests a few years ago. They were shot by Pigeon people. They witnessed the death of their relatives. Wei's hatred for Shangcheng people was blood feud. And after being sensible, Wei was even more unconvinced. Why can the people in the upper city enjoy the sun, but the people in the lower city will not see the sun? Why is it that the people of upper city can enjoy delicious food and wine, while the people of Deshan are starving? Uptown people even have fresh air, but Daiken people have to inhale the thick toxic smog, and they will get sick and die at some point in time. It is clear that Ziyuan is the orthodox, and Piltover was split from Ziyuan. Lin Wen stretched out his hands, took Wei in his arms, and pressed his chin against the girl's head, but he felt a little prickly. Well, this feeling is because Wei likes short hair, because she thinks short hair is neat, clean, and convenient for fights. Lin Wen repeated softly, I understand, I understand. Wei twisted his body and seemed to feel very uncomfortable and wanted to break free, but Lin Wen hugged him even harder. Seeing this, Wei loosened his body and fell softly into Lin Wen's arms. Lin Wen looked ahead with deep eyes. In front of Violet, she is not a game character. She is not a string of data, nor is she her own imagination. She is alone. A living, flesh and blood person with warmth. The first time I saw Wei, Lin Wen still had admiration and yearning for the character, but slowly, he became explosive towards Wei. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com and Milo and Craig, Lin Wen only has love and distress. She and them are my family. A few minutes passed. Brother, what should I do now? After calming down, Wei buried his head on Lin Wen's chest and asked him softly. Rarely, Wei actually called his brother. Unlike Bakubo, Milo and the others, Wei always likes to address Lin Wen by his first name, and even likes to tease Lin Wen with the surname that Lin Wen was taken by Lao Zhoulang. Call him Lord Laurent. After all, the people of Zan only have names, not surnames. But Lin Wen is an outlier. Rest assured. Leave it to me, I'll be there for everything. And what you need to do is to be obedient, stay here honestly, and you won't come out until I settle the matter. Lin Wen rubbed Wei's head, and rubbed her short hair, which had been combed with oil, into a mess, and said confidently. Wei raised his head to look at Lin Wen, a little unhappy with Lin Wen's actions, then lowered his head again, accompanied by a soft At this moment, a strange mechanical sound resounded in Lin Wen's mind. Ding! Pigeon Law Enforcer's favorability has increased, and he has gained 1000 experience. Ding! You have been upgraded, all attributes +1. Ding! Congratulations to the player, the hero Pigeon Magistrate's favorability for you has exceeded 90%, and the player will receive a reward, the chance to draw X1, and the corresponding hero card. Ding! Congratulations to the player for successfully attacking Pigeon Magistrate and obtaining the hero card, Pigeon Magistrate, please check it in your backpack. Lin Wen smiled when he heard the voice. I have to do something again. Player, Lin Wen level, 15 strength, 155, affects life, increases attack, agility, 70, increase defense, increase speed, intelligence, 90, increase magic affinity, increase singing speed, reading, 0. Skills, advanced repair, basic swordsmanship, permeating strength hero card, Pigeon Magistrate items, space-time ring, 10M, Dolan sword, red potion x3, broken unknown rune fragment x1 number of draws remaining, x1 hero witness system. This is Lin Wen's golden finger in this world, and it's not so much a system as it is a realistic version of the strategy game, because Lin Wen only needs to make contact with the target hero, and then get familiar with it. The opponent's initial favorability can activate the hero card, and after the favorability is increased, experience points and attribute points can be obtained. As for Lin Wen, if he wants to improve his strength, leveling up is definitely not a good way, because at one level, Lin Wen's measurements will only increase by 3 points. This is too much like a card game. Because in a card game, does level matter? Seriously, the important thing in card games is not the level, friends, the important thing is the card. Krypton is in place, then the next step is to leapfrog and defeat the enemy. Do you understand? Lin Wen opened his hero card collection library, which is called a black. He can only vaguely guess the hero through the black silhouette, but this is not a problem for the Golden Cancer player Lin Wen, who is familiar with game heroes. Although Lin Wen didn't reach the LOL rank, he only reached the Golden rank, but his love for the game, and the number of games, Lin Wen refused to accept anyone. At the top of the card library, the cards are roughly planned into 3 categories, namely Strength, Agility, and Intelligence. And click on the corresponding category, and there will be 2 subcategories under this category, so that Lin Wen, who is a player, can collect strategies. The power type can be further divided into fighters and tanks. Agility can be divided into assassin, archer. The intelligence type can be divided into mage, auxiliary. As long as the card is activated, Lin Wen can obtain the corresponding attributes of the star. 3-star cards can add a total of 20 points to Lin Wen's measurements, strength, agility, and intelligence for short. 4-star cards are 30 points, 5-star cards are 50 points, and 6-star cards directly add 100 points to Lin Wen. Point measurements. There are also main attributes and sub-attributes, respectively. For example, the Strength Hero card Wei can add 10 points of strength, 5 points of agility, and 5 points of intelligence to Lin Wen. As an Agility Hero card, the Explosion can increase Lin Wen by 10 points of agility, 5 points of strength and 5 points of intelligence. Not only that, when the hero's favorability towards Lin Wen reaches a certain height, Lin Wen can also get a lottery chance. It has been 5 years since he came to Zon, and Lin Wen has successfully activated 4 cards, and now, he has also successfully collected the first hero card. If you successfully get a card, you will get the card's main attribute bonus, and the main attribute bonus of a 3-star card is 100 points. Because of this, Lin Wen's power directly broke through to 155. This is an astonishing number. Before that, Lin Wen's strength was only 55, but at that time he could easily lift things that ordinary people can lift with a mechanical arm. Now, Lin Wen doesn't know his own strength. What height has his strength reached? But if you think about it, he should have been stronger than many human heroes. As for the remaining lucky draw chances, it was a high-level lottery that was rewarded after obtaining the 6 card. Come on, anyway, everything depends on the face. Click the use button behind the lottery. There is no cool cutscenes, just hear a ding sound. After getting a hint of a half-star item, in Lin Wen's system item library, only system items are stored. There are many a small mung bean-like thing appeared behind Lan Jian. Haha! Lin Wen twitched the corners of his eyes. Advanced lottery, didn't you say that the probability of half-star items is only 5%? But this is what I actually drew? I really can't do it. Opening its panel, Lin Wen nodded, although he was a little disappointed, because he had already thought of how to use this thing. From a certain point of view, it is exactly what Lin Wen needs now. When he took it out, Lin Wen's hand immediately appeared a small warm bead. It was only the size of a thumb. It was bright in color, green throughout, and felt warm. Healing orb, props, quality. Effect: the wearer will continue to recover vitality, recovery 0.5 per hour. It's a good thing, it can be used by old Zhou. Lin Wen slaps his mouth, and the recovery rate is 0.5 per hour. For him, a guy with superhuman strength and strong vitality, this is a completely useless prop. But for the frail people, this is a very good thing. Especially in the poisonous place of Zon. This thing is worn by old Zhou. It will definitely reduce the damage of poison gas to him. But Lin Wen didn't go back to old Zhou. Instead, he walked to a corner. As Lin Wen went deeper and deeper, there were fewer and fewer people around. Lin Wen had already entered a place he shouldn't have entered. There are gangsters everywhere in the ditch of Zon. Zon's ditch is chaotic, dirty, and active. Here, is the cultural source of today's Zon. Lin Wen held his breath, the green waste gas entered his lungs with some tiny metal particles, burning his trachea and burning his internal organs. He would feel a little choked. Even after living in Zon for 5 years, but I still haven't gotten used to this haze. Xiaobang Bao is better than him in this respect. Should I say, is it because he is not a local born here? The air of Zon. No solution anymore. Compared to this rust-smelling air, poor vision is the most troublesome thing. Well, I can only ask someone for help. Hey, can't you come out and help me? There was obviously no one around, but Lin Wen suddenly raised his head and said. Taking off the grey hat, Lin Wen raised his head and said aloud, "You know, I really hate these grey haze, although, you seem to like it, but you can't impose your preferences on me, isn't it? After all, you don't have to breathe." Lin Wen paused and said again, "Of course, you don't have to worry, because I'm not going to trouble him, I just have something to tell him, so you don't have to worry that I will kill him. You know, if I think about it, even if he has 100 lives and has remodeled himself 100 times, he will be dead. But this time is different. People will come from the upper city. Taking advantage of the chaos in the bottom city, he will definitely take this opportunity to do something. I have dealt with him so many times, and I am very familiar with his style. I'm like you, we love Zon, and of course I don't want this place to be chaotic. But if Vander is in trouble and doesn't have time to manage the Black Alley, then Zon's underground will be messed up, and you don't want to see it either. Chaos in Zon." Lin Wen spoke to the sky, but looked up, through the thick haze, except for the faintly visible abyss and ravines, it was a huge bridge with steel fences in groups, such as breathing steel behemoths. It was Zon's in the corridor of the square. The highest part of Zon is connected to the lowest part of Pichon. This is the origin of the upper class and the lower class. But in fact, Zon and Peugeots think differently. After living here for 5 years, Lin Wen clearly knows the advantages of Zon. It is tolerant and strong, and its citizens are tenacious and hard-working. Abandoned, ridiculed, ostracized, oppressed, in a desperate situation where everyone else would die, the Zon people used their wisdom to make Zon flourish again. Of course, when Lin Wen was talking about them, he was not referring to the bullying gangsters, nor the pioneers who were trying to smuggle or develop taboo technology to the bottom of the city. Lin Wen said they were people like old Zhou Lang. It was a group of people who did not hesitate to make themselves suffer in order to make Zon better. Lin Wen stopped, waiting for something. When there was a gust of breeze behind him, a smile appeared on Lin Wen's face. When he turned around, he saw a blue bird appeared behind Lin Wen at some point. It was an extremely beautiful bird, but it wasn't flesh, but it wasn't a mechanical bird made by Zon or Pichon technology, but a green bird made of energy. It tilted its head and was combing its feathers with its beak. It didn't use its eyes to look at Lin Wen, as if it didn't like to pay attention to Lin Wen. "Don't do this, I can swear to you that I won't do it." Lin Wen raised his hand and swore at the bird. This scene is strange. A teenager who strayed into someone else's territory and swore with a bird that he would not hurt anyone. This scene is too dramatic. You said this last time, and you said the same last time, but you still did it. You interrupted their mechanical arms, mechanical legs, and pushed them into the ditch. Although they didn't die, they did. There are also sequelae. It finally turned to look at Lin Wen, and in its eyes of birds, there was an emotion that humans have, that is anger. As if expressing dissatisfaction, it placed its wings on Lin Wen's head, and then slapped Lin Wen hard. Lin Wen spread his hands, shrugged, let it hit him, and then said confidently, "That's what they deserve, who made them think about my children. A deal is a deal, and the people of Zon can't deceive Zon people, but what did they do? They bullied a few children because they were so tall. Lin Wen, you can't protect them forever. You will leave Zon one day. I have a hunch, and at that time, what will they do without your protection? The emerald green bird shook his head, and his voice was sweet and gentle, like a gust of soft wind. In Zon, it was a miracle, an impossible miracle. Due to the haze, the Zon people's voices are somewhat hoarse, which is a sign of damage to the lungs and throat. Nonsense, I'm a Zon, why should I leave Zon? Why do you say that again? I didn't say you're not from Zon. Because you always said I would go, you said, it's been 3 years since I met you, but you've said that no less than 100 times. It stopped on Lin Wen's shoulder and said seriously, but I have this hunch. Farewell, you'd better help me get rid of these poisonous gases first. Blinking, the bird lightly pecked Lin Wen's face with its beak, as if to vent its dissatisfaction. Then he said, you said yes, you won't kill people. After all, it opened its arms and waved it lightly. Then, a wind rose from Lin Wen's feet, driving the surrounding haze into the sky. Then, Lin Wen showed his white teeth and smiled very happily. Ha, it's time. It's time to let those people in the upper city taste the air of the lower city. After all, this is a souvenir made by their hands. When the smog dissipated, Lin Wen saw the surroundings clearly. I have come to a place that looks like an abandoned factory. Going over there, Lin Wen was thinking as he walked. Whether to do it or not. If you do it, if you don't kill the opponent, it will only cause trouble, but if you kill him, then there is no way for him to explain it. After thinking for a while, Lin Wen slammed his palm. Of course it's still the main thing. How effective is the medicine? In a deserted and empty factory in a ditch that did not belong to Haiziang, a cold voice sounded. The thin man stood upright in front of the glass window, looked at the huge monster in the sea outside, and asked softly. It's the final stage. Now, it's time for the test results. A man with a thin face, sunken eyes, and yellow pupils came up. He was wearing a coat that belonged to a pharmacist, walked to his side, and gently shook the test tube in his hand. The glass test tube was filled with purple fluorescent liquid, and he squinted at the room. Nodding, the skinny man put his hands behind his back and walked towards the gangster who was in the middle of the room. Hello. Reaching out and grabbed the opponent's head, he squatted down slowly, and Shirko stared into the opponent's eyes calmly. I asked you to follow them. But why are you and your friends sleeping there? They have foreign aid. Foreign aid? Yes. The person who was bound was the gangster who had been entangled with Wei several hours ago. At this moment, he was shaking his body and looking at the man in front of him in fear. There was no expression on his slender face. There were many scars on his face. The most serious one was a wound that seemed to go through an eyeball, and one of his eyes was a scary prosthetic eye. Tell me, after all, this is the reason that determines whether I can keep you or not. Hiko looked at him quietly. It was a man in a robe, and when he showed up, he knocked us all stunned. Yes, Vander's adopted daughter knew him, he must be the thug at Forgans, he must be Vander's subordinate. Huang Mao spoke inarticulately, for fear that he would be hurt by the other party if he spoke too slowly. A robe? Yes, the grey-white robe, his skills are very good, I'm sure he... Huang Mao tried his best to supplement the information he saw before fainting, in order to protect himself. Herko sighed suddenly and interrupted him, tell me, how did you get here? Huang Mao was puzzled, but still replied, Silko, I was brought here by your people. The alchemist next to him came up, touched his chin, and looked at Shirko with a pair of eyes. Silko knew what he wanted to say, so he shook his head, and when he got up, he kicked the chair over, the legs of the chair were broken, and Huang Mao also took the opportunity to stand up. You won't kill me. It's not your fault. Shirko waved his hand, you have done what you can, he is not in your business scope, get out. Hearing Shirko say this, the alchemist on the side was stunned. The hand shaking the potion also stopped. Don't look at it, give up here, pack up quickly, and leave as soon as possible. Silco walked to the table, where a round red button was inlaid, opened the protective glass device, and Silco pressed the button. It was the sound of an emergency siren, and Silco quickly pressed it 3 times. Soon, in the underground of the factory, a group of naked men stunned for a few seconds, and then quickly began to pack up the things around them. Boom! And just when Shirko was about to look back to see if the door was closed, the yellow hare who ran out earlier flew back upside down and flew straight in front of Shirko. He fainted again. The corners of the mouth spit out no longer white foam, but blood foam, but it was accompanied by some dark green. It's coming so fast. Shirko didn't change his face, sorted out the leather gloves on his hands, and walked forward unhurriedly. A voice came from the front, and it was a childish voice. Hey, Shirko, if I were you, I would put down the musket. You've seen it before, and you know it's useless to me. The visitor was dressed in a grey-white robe and stepped on boots made of shap. His attire looked a little plain, different from that of most Zons. He was walking towards him with a smile on his face, like greeting an old friend, very cordial. I'm here to talk about things. Shirko looked at him with a smile, but in the next second, he quickly pulled out his musket and shot forward. With a loud noise, a large group of bullets was shot out, but the boy who was still standing there suddenly disappeared. It's really fast. Shirko withdrew his smile, threw away the musket, and said calmly, What's the matter with the dog from the Vander family coming to my place today? Also, why doesn't the puppy wear the mask given by the owner? Lin Wen, who had disappeared before, suddenly appeared from above and landed in front of Shirko, sniffing. Lin Wen looked at Shirko and said displeasedly, Although I didn't intend to kill you, your mouth if you don't want to accept it, then you may have to suffer from flesh and blood. Hearing the sound, Shirko released the hand holding the dagger behind his back, took his hands out from behind and raised them over his shoulders. He showed an indescribable smile and said calmly, I'm joking with you. Then, bowing politely to Lin Wen, he put his hand on his chest and said, Hello, the magistrate of Zondich. The last 3 words, Shirko bit very strangely. Lin Wen knew what Silco meant. Silco, I came to you for 2 things. Not intending to quarrel with Shirko, Lin Wen directly stated the purpose of his trip here. You said, I'll do it. Shirko nodded, turned around and walked a few steps, leaning back against the desk and holding his hands in front of him. He looked at Lin Wen calmly, After all, I don't have the right to reject you now, isn't it? I like you for that. Although I don't know why you broke up with Vander, it's easier to talk to you than to talk to him. Lin Wen squatted on the ground and said with a smile, First, you are not allowed to do anything while the magistrate from Shangcheng is in Zon, you are not allowed to leave this factory, and you are not allowed to contact anyone. Oh why? Lin Wen pointed to the yellow hair on the ground, It's boring to go on. Don't either. I'm afraid you'll come out to do things. After all, your ability to do things is too strong. I'm too afraid that you'll make some noise. Hilko, who had called Lin Wen many times, knew what Lin Wen meant when he was talking. He laughed lightly and said, But compared to me, aren't those people more dangerous? Look, I'm the only one who... Before Hilko could finish speaking, Lin Wen interrupted him. Okay, I know, you are more dangerous than them, because you have it here. Nodding his head with his finger, Lin Wen continued, But don't worry, I will also warn those guys. Saying so, but using Vander's name can overwhelm them. Shirko nodded lightly, indicating that he agreed. But he still opened his mouth and said with some emotion, It's a pity. Don't be a pity, if it wasn't for some reason, you would have died 10 times in my hands. Lin Wen looked at Shirko angrily, Do you think I don't know what you did in private? Shrugging indifferently, Shirko also replied, Didn't you go to eradicate the 2 disappearing workshops of mine? Lin Wen grinned, The 2 have been cleared. Shirko looked at Lin Wen and said nothing. Lin Wen also shrugged like Shirko, and said again, and the second thing, what about your potion? Is it done? If it is done, show it to me. Shirko didn't hesitate, threw out a bottle of potion and threw it to Lin Wen, and said aloud, you shouldn't be with someone like Vander, you should join us. With you on my side and with us, we will surely make Pigeon people fear us and stop them from discriminating and enslaving us. Lin Wen raised his hand, looked up at the potion, and said, idiot. After being scolded by Lin Wen, Hilko didn't react. No, Sirko, do you think you can defeat the pilgrims with this thing? Don't you know how powerful they are now? I don't need to beat them. Of course I know that I can't beat them. I just need the people in the city to be afraid of us. I just want them to know that we are not fish on their chopping board. Hiko said calmly. Of course he understood the gap between Zon and Piltover, but that wasn't a reason not to resist. Are you willing to be squeezed just because you can't beat it? Cirque denounced this reasoning. What he wants is not conquest, not status, but dignity, the dignity of the Zon people. Haha, you really are an idiot. It's righteous and awe-inspiring to say such a thing, but it's actually going to die. Lin Wen said with a sarcastic smile. At the same time, the data on the medicine in hand came out. Glimmer potion, props, quality. Effect, after use, the user will increase 20 points of strength, 5 points of agility, and enter a state of excitement, ignoring part of the pain. The duration is directly proportional to the physical fitness of the user. Side effects, damage to body functions, repeated use will damage brain cells and produce mutations. Silco, promise me one more thing. Sirko frowned. You and the alchemist next to you must not take this potion. Lin Wen threw the potion back to Shirko and looked at him and said seriously. Reason. This thing can hurt people's brains. Lin Wen put his hands behind his back and said calmly. How did you know? Hilko was finally surprised once, first looking at the alchemist wearing a white coat not far away, and after the other party nodded, Hilko asked Lin Wen, the shimmering potion has not been tested on the human body, but on live animals, there are indeed the side effects you mentioned, but it should be a secret, my lord magistrate. Because of his prosthetic eyes, Shirko can only narrow one eye when he squints. He looked at Lin Wen with a cold tone, but asked calmly, have you been watching me all the time? I'm not that boring, I observe you. Lin Wen blew his little finger and said disdainfully, Silco, are you taking yourself too much as a character? Shirko was silent. Don't play tricks with me, Shirko, you are very good at fighting and have more money, so your existence has seriously affected Vander's status. I didn't kill you, just because Vander, after all, he's still thinking about the old love, he drove you out of the dark alley, and you are not allowed to enter the dark alley for life. This is the punishment for you. But, Silco, I personally still appreciate you. Lin Wen said to Silco. But this is the truth of Lin Wen, he really admires Silco. This character, who was not in Lin Wen's attention originally, came into Lin Wen's eyes little by little. Shirko is not a hero, and he doesn't even appear in the cosmic history of the Alliance. But he was indeed the first person who made Lin Wen vigilant as a non-hero. This is a very dangerous guy. He could overturn Zon at any time and cause a disturbance, so Lin Wen had to watch him. After all, Lin Wen is the one who knows the gap between the lower city and the upper city. The memory of the previous life told Lin Wen that in this world, whether it was Zon or Piltover, they were actually just ants. There are too many beings stronger than Zon and Piltover. For example, country. Another example is God. Half a year after coming to this world, Lin Wen wrote a list of strengths in his mind. On this list, Pigeon and Zon add up, but only one person is on the list. Lin Wen himself is also at the lowest level. Runeland. There are too many monsters in the world of Runeland alone. Lin Wen felt that he was here to pay off the debt. At the beginning, his favorite position to play was the middle lane, and his favorite thing to do was to catch the bottom lane. Well now, the guys in the bot lane are more monsters than each other. On this list in Lin Wen's mind, the most powerful existence is undoubtedly the star-casting Dragon King. That is a guy whose brain is not proportional to his strength and is controlled by a giant. A TO level existence is the Dragon King of casting stars. At T1 level, Lin Wen thinks it should be a true like bard. T2 is a giant. T3 is the demigod and the ascended Darkwing Void or something. T4 is high magic humans and mutant magical creatures or something. T5 is a human hero. Like the heroes that Lin Wen has seen now, such as Wei, Bakuba, Xiao Ike, and the guy next to Shirko, these guys belong to the T5 ranks, and most of them are guys who are wandering in the middle. Since that's the case, why don't you? Herko opened his mouth tentatively. Don't recruit me, I appreciate you, not you. Lin Wen said with a frown. This fellow Serko, after seeing his strength, he always wanted to bring himself to join the team, but Lin Wen would like to die with him? Now that there is a gap in strength between Pichon and Zon, Zon may not be able to get into the woman's eyes if he really makes a fuss. Shirko shut up and didn't speak. In other words, there is really no way to kill Lin Wen, otherwise he wouldn't speak to recruit Lin Wen. Anyway, you are right to listen to me. Lin Wen thought about it for a while, but still said it to Shirko. Seeing that Shirko didn't speak, ignored Lin Wen, and closed his eyes with the expression of seeing off guests, Lin Wen said again, friendly reminder, let me tell you a secret about Pichon. Oh. Shirko opened his eyes and looked at Lin Wen. Whose Piltover is Piltover? Cirque frowned, his elegant expression disappeared, he looked at Lin Wen, hesitated for a moment, and said aloud, member. Seeing that Lin Wen's teeth were about to burst into laughter, Circo immediately added, it's the big family behind the senator. Lin Wen couldn't deny it, looked at Silco and asked deeply, so your answer is that the major families jointly control Piltover? Isn't it? Pichon is bright and beautiful, and it is called the City of Evolution, but you and I both know that those are just illusions. In the real City of Evolution, more than 90% of the resources are monopolized by the big families, and the apprentices at the bottom, no matter how talented they are, as long as they are not from a big family, they will sign a slave contract with the big family to seek a job. Can such a city be called an enlightened, orderly evolutionary city? Silco said disdainfully, it's ridiculous, shameful evolution. It makes sense, but it's not entirely right. Lin Wen nodded. Hilko was at the bottom of Zon, but he could see Pichon's current situation, which showed that he was different from Fender. The reason why Vander is at peace today is not because of how smart he is a reckless man, a gang leader who wants to lead the Zon people to a better place. However, after washing his hands in a golden basin and becoming the owner of the tavern, it wasn't that Vander Lee realized it, but because he was afraid of being beaten, he no longer wanted to see the Xian go to his death. Too many Zons died on Ash Day and Baku and Six's parents died on that day. What's more, the law enforcement officers at the upper level can't forget that day. Then tell me, what did I say wrong? Hiko asked. A place. Lin Wen looked at Shirko and said calmly, there is one thing you didn't say right. As a city-state, Pichon does not have a centralized government. The people who control this city are the families you call them. After hearing this, Circo lowered his head and smiled contemptuously, wanting to say that you are not exactly the same as what I said? That being the case, what am I saying wrong? But Lin Wen opened his mouth again, but Cirque, the only thing you are wrong about is that Pichon is not controlled by major families, but by one family. Lin Wen stretched out a finger and stood up. Looked at Shirko calmly and said, it's the Philos family. The family that discovered the original crystal. Shirko frowned. Primary crystal. Lin Wen was stunned for a moment, but immediately smiled. Yes. Now at this point, Jace should still be playing with his little hammer, right? Remember what was said in the background story, Jess invented the hex crystal on the crystal excavated by the Qing Ganjiang family, that is, the product of the Philos family was redeveloped, and then the hex was developed. Technology, but at this time, Wei is only 13 or 14 years old, and Jinx is only a little girl less than 10 years old. Therefore, Jace should still be an apprentice, not the future guardian who developed the hex technology. But to put it this way, the background story itself is not fully memorized, the bad habit of eating books with fists on the outside, and the blurred timeline of the story background, Lin Wen is not sure whether his guess is correct now. For example, in the original background story, didn't Ike have both parents and was almost sent to be a master? But now, that little guy has become the same character as Lin Wen, doing odd jobs in a grocery store. You mean, the actual controller of Pigeon is the Philos family? Shirko was a little disbelieving. Don't talk nonsense when this sentence goes out, otherwise don't blame me for moving your head. Lin Wen waved his hand. She will help you move your head, free and neat. Shirko's mouth twitched. Because he found that Lin Wen didn't seem to be joking with him. He was telling the truth. If it's what Lin Wen said, then the richest man in Pigeon, the counselors who set the development policy of Pigeon, and the major families hidden behind them, what are those? Shirko suddenly felt a little cold on his neck. If it is as Lin Wen said, then Pigeon is not scattered, at least. After having the actual controller, Pigeon is even more difficult to deal with. A plate of powerful loose sand, this is not scary to Shirko, but if the loose sand can obey the order, it will be very scary. Okay, here is my friendly reminder. In front of Herko, Lin Wen got up and patted his butt, but suddenly thought of something. He grinned at Herko. By the way, Herko, my strength has improved a lot recently, showing that show you. Shirko tilted his head slightly, not quite understanding what Lin Wen meant. But Lin Wen knew very well that for a person like Shirko, you must not let him raise hope, not at all. Otherwise, if he sees a gap, he will definitely try his best to open it and expand the gap until he can achieve his goal. But what if there were no cracks in the first place? The difference between smart people and ordinary people is that they are smart because they don't do useless work, and Shirko is a smart person. Under Lin Wen's robe, his slender fingers stretched out and clenched into fists. He wants to let Shirko know the gap between the two sides, so that he will be honest and quiet, listen to Lin Wen's words, and continue to dormant in his corner. He took a deep breath, and then let out a long mouthful of turbid air with AHA. Lin Wen clenched his teeth tightly, feeling the hot air flow one after another in front of his lips and teeth. He patted a circular load-bearing column with a diameter of 4 meters in front of him. The huge air wave lifted the robe and blew around, and Shirko, who was standing not far away, raised his hand involuntarily to block it in front of him. In front of Lin Wen, the fans haped punching wind, while smashing through the stone pillar, also shattered countless small stones within 2 meters. Lin Wen felt that his physical strength was partially reduced, but in front of him, the stone pillar collapsed, a 2-meter-sized stone was smashed and flew out, and crashed into the wall of the factory at a very fast speed. In the middle, only a loud noise was heard, and Hilko turned his head stiffly, and saw that the stone was embedded in the metal wall, forming a huge depression on the wall. Skill, vigor of permeability, effect, consume physical energy and swing a fist to cause a small area of damage of strength x2 to the front. Cooling time, 6 hours, refillable storage, 2, Silco. I've been punching for 15 years, can you stop it? Lin Wen looked at Shirko and asked him coldly. The corners of Shirko's mouth and eyes were twitching, and his hands were shaking slightly, but he still tried his best to calm himself down, stretched out his hand to adjust the tie of his suit, and said, Are you still a human? Humans, it is impossible to use the power of the flesh to make such an attack. Impossible. Lin Wen turned around, put on his hat, and walked outside the factory. But one sentence remained. Leave it to Shirko. Silco, I agree with your idea. Ignorant forbearance will only make the gap between Pigeon and Zon bigger and bigger. But you are wrong. You are even more wrong than Vanderlee. Lin Wen looked at Shirko coldly, and then said, you thought you could make the Pigeon people submit with those potions, but uuganshu.com is afraid, but you are so wrong. The current Philos family will only be stronger than me, she will not be weaker than me. So you, do it yourself. I am afraid that everyone is accustomed to not reading what the author says, so I put it here. This sentence is really important. Well, it's about Camille anyway. First of all, the hex heart of the blue steel shadow was not developed by Jace, and the hex gem was not developed by Jace, it was made by the Philos family imitating the Shell people, crystal pioneers, after all, the Shell people that's it, and in the future, the entire Leather City will be using hex gemstones, so that many Shell people will be slaughtered. The heart of Qing Ganjing is the core of the real Shell people, and it was developed and installed by her first love. Therefore, the age of Qing Ganjing in the first 6 episodes of Shuangcheng, I think it should be between 7,080 years old, she's a veritable little old lady, and it's no problem being Jace's grandma. After all, everyone has seen that the research and development speed of Hextech is very fast. After a few years in the play, the explosion is at most 15 or 16 years old, but Hex has already left the portal, so awesome magic technology. And Qing Ganjing killed his younger brother and became the real behind the scenes controller of Philos after the fallout of Jace Victor. This plot should take place in the next season's Twin Cities. When Yin is caught in the future, it will be more 90 years old and almost 100 years old. In short, I checked a lot of information, it should be correct, so if you have any doubts, you can say it in the comment area, I will read it, and I will correct the wrong place appropriately. On the way back to the Black Alley, Lin Wen lowered his head and thought about one thing. He is not intimidating Shirko, but telling Shirko a fact. Vander and Silco, the two who share the same goal but eventually parted ways, because they eventually had differences in philosophy. Lin Wen has been following Vander for the past few years, and he can see through Vander's thoughts. He advocates the idea of peace and strives to divide the boundary with the upper city, but Zon. How could he not survive by relying on Piltover? Although most Zon people hate Pigeon, but they envy the life of Pigeon, and the Zon people rely on Pigeon to survive. The transactions that were restricted in Pigeon were not controlled by anyone in Zon. Therefore, Pigeon drove the black market in Zon. It is interesting to say, does this mean that the rich first led to the rich later? The reason why Piltover is so rich is because Piltover's location is very special. It sits at the intersection of the two continents of Valoran and Shurima. Its geographical location brings trade. The bonus points are definitely much higher than the island Bilgewater, and in such a geographical environment, even a pig will fly high because of this. And the pilgrims are obviously not pigs. They are extremely smart. Under their governance, Piltover soon became the place with the most developed trade and technology in the entire continent, and this is the origin of the City of Evolution. Hilkobi's Vanderbilt, obviously, he clearly saw the gap between Pigeon and Zon. Shirko believes that with the passage of time, the gap between Pigeon and Zon will only get bigger and bigger, and Lin Wen agrees with this, because he is the one who knows this the most. He knows better than anyone that Jace will develop Hextech in the near future, and when this genius really brings magic into technology, Zon can no longer be a prick. Their eyes. Unmilitary weapons can easily clean up gutter rats, which is probably the source of the superior self-confidence of Shangcheng people. So from some perspectives, Lin Wen doesn't really want Silco to jump too much now. Although the possibility is very small, if Shirko really enters Camille's field of vision because of the low light, it is very likely that his head will appear on the streets of Zon the next day. It doesn't matter. Doubt, as an outstanding spy, Camille Philos has this strength. Moreover, Lin Wen remembers very clearly that the person behind Pigeon's backstage. No, according to the timeline, Her brother should be still alive now, right? I remember that it was only after Victor had a cultist of glorious evolution that she personally judged her own younger brother. Judging from the current time, then she should be around 70 years old now? But even so, she will only be stronger than Lin Wen now, not weaker than Lin Wen. Although she has obtained a complete hero card and her strength has improved by leaps and bounds, Lin Wen does not think she can beat it. After all, as the Philos family, the most wrong, she is the strongest spy in the entire Piltover, Camille Philos, she is no longer a human being. Humanity? Can a person whose heart has been turned into a machine still be considered a human being? On the list that Lin Wen had sorted out in his head, Camille, a little old lady, could be described as a middle to upper level existence among human beings. The ranking in T5 was definitely in the top ranks, and it was accompanied by the C developed by Jess in the future. After Kextech was used in the military on Camille's body, she would be a magic machine person with the possibility of touching T4 in the future. The reason why Lin Wen acted Loki a few years ago was because he was afraid that he would come into the eyes of the little old lady too early. After all, there was no one in Pitchin who could compare to her in the assassination. As the strongest spy, her intelligence and force, they are all the highest existences in Pitchin. In short, Camille must not be messed with. You must know that she uses the hex core, not the hex crystals that can be imitated. The crystal heart on Camille is the core system of a shell human race. It's done, and the hex core. With the death of the producer Hakim and the disappearance of the blueprint, the crystal on Camille's body is likely to be the only hex heart in the world. Yes, if you can't mess with her, don't mess with her. After Lin Wen opened the door of Forgan Tavern before returning to Forgan Tavern, Lin Wen felt that the atmosphere was very wrong. In the tavern in front of him, a group of Fender's subordinates, a gang of men and women with various tattoos on their bodies and faces, all stood up. Others took up weapons, all turned their backs to the door of the tavern, and looked at the location of the bar. Lin Wen is not tall. He is just over 1.6 meters. After all, this body is only 15 years old. He is nourishing and keeping up with the growth stage. Therefore, Lin Hu cannot see the situation. Wen could only pat a big guy in front of him. The other party turned his head, and the words of dissatisfaction were written on his big face full of flesh and blood, but when he saw that the person who photographed him was Lin Wen, his expression changed, and he nodded to Lin Wen gently. "Gray, let me see what happened." The big man named Gray shook his head, stretched out his hand to stop Lin Wen, who was about to go inside, looked at Lin Wen and said, "Lin Wen, don't go in, the stipends are down." As Vander's subordinate, he certainly knew the reason why the magistrate came down to the bottom city. Pitchin will come down to Low City, and it will only do one thing, that is arrests Pitchin's on, two cities, sister cities adjacent to each other, follow the policy of non-interference, but it is said that they do not interfere with each other, but after the police officers of Pai Lao go to the bottom city, they will not interfere? 80% of the shady transactions in the bottom city were done by the punks in the upper city. Wei and the others are with you now, it's not good for you to go in. Although the Grey people are thick and strong, their minds are very delicate. Since Vander can make the other party search, with an indifferent expression on his face, it means that Wei will not be in the Forgan Tavern now, and there is a greater possibility is protected by the person in front of him. The seconding command of Forgan's Tavern, the trench magistrate Linvin Laurent. Therefore, if Lin Wen had a conversation with the law enforcement officer, it would only make things more troublesome. Have they come? Lin Wen frowned. It's too fast. It had only been 4 hours since he received Wei and went to Shirko, and now, the magistrate had already arrived at the bottom city. Even if it's an elevator, it still takes an hour or two to travel, right? Take a search warrant, and various factors. Lin Wen felt a little headache again. Wei and the others, what did they do? It even made the law enforcement officers come out to arrest people on the same day. I won't go in, I'll take a look. Gray nodded, his tall body moved away, and he patted the person in front of him. When the man turned his head, he looked at Gray in confusion. Gray tapped back with his thumb, and then the other party saw Lin Wen, who smiled and waved at him. Soon, Lin Wen spontaneously gave way in front of him. He sat at a table and looked at the half bottle of Saigon yeast wine left. This kind of bar. Lin Wen didn't dislike it. After all, the degree of alcohol is very low. So Lin Wen poured the wine into a small clean cup and drank it with small sips. This kind of wine comes from a port city called Nashlaim in Shurima. The materials for making it are also very simple, just use the local shea root of Shurima, add alcohol to ferment, and it will taste so much sour, but the taste is very good, very suitable for Zon's radish heads. Well, it's a bit like chewing bread. Lin Wen tasted the wine, looked at the bar, and listened carefully to the sounds coming from inside. His five senses have long surpassed that of ordinary people. Marcus, that's enough. Lin Wen saw a female law enforcement officer with brown curly hair stretch out her hand and hold down a young man. Vander, you've crossed the line on this matter, hand it over to me. The woman with brown curly hair was tall, but in front of Vander, she looked like a child. Vander shook his head, Grayson, they're not here. This time, it's not a small matter, Fender, give me the people, otherwise I won't bring as many people next time. Grayson looked around, but still said aloud, you don't will want the law enforcement officers to conduct a big search of the Black Alley. Grayson, I'm really not here, I have no one to give you. Damn, do you think we weren't prepared before we came? We got the news, they are. The youth who was held down by Grayson raised his finger angrily to Vander. Accompanied by his shouting at Vander, everyone in the tavern took a step forward, and one of the strong men snorted heavily with his nose. This made all the law enforcement officers except Grayson, including Marcus, nervous. One of them even took out a gun. Go back. Vander shook his head at them. And Grayson also turned around and pressed the gun, then turned to look at Vander, and said, take a step to talk. Vander wanted to shake his head, but looking into Grayson's eyes, he nodded, walked out of the bar, walked to the basement beside him, and said to Grayson, come on, come this way. Grayson followed Xiang Vander to the basement, grabbed Marcus, and solemnly warned him, don't cause me trouble, this is not pitchin'. But. No but, Marcus, listen to me. Grayson patted him on the shoulder, and Marcus was silent. Went into the basement with Vander and Grayson, but the atmosphere became more and more tense. A group of gangsters in the Black Alley looked at the four law enforcement officers fiercely. Although Marcus was a little nervous, he was not afraid. He took out his portable stick and smashed it heavily on a table, knocking the table over and splashing the wine. Marcus looked at them angrily and waved it. He shouted loudly with his sling stick, what are you looking at? You dirty and stinking gutter rats! Come up if you have the guts, I just want to arrest a few people to fill up my performance. Marcus said and strode forward, trying to squeeze out the crowd, and on both sides, a short and thin airplane head man with a nose stud stepped forward, but just as he was about to walk towards Marcus, he was caught. His partner was caught. Don't. The partner shook his head at him. If the magistrate was beaten, the person involved would definitely be arrested and rehabilitated in the upper city prison, but if the magistrate was killed, the entire Black Alley would not be better. And this is where Marcus's confidence lies, because behind him is a powerful city-state, a city-state more powerful than Zon. The pilgrims will not tolerate resistance from the Zon, never. The bridge-pulling operation a few years ago is a good example of this. Marcus pushed a few people away, and then, he saw a teenager who was sitting and drinking. Looking at the clean young man with no tattoos all over his body, no nose-stud earrings, no strange clothes, but with smooth black hair, Marcus's eyes lit up. The boy in front of him is by no means a gangster, and Zon's gangster can't be dressed like this. Then he is the object he uses to establish his prestige. Marcus walked towards him, and then smashed the stick heavily in front of him. What are you doing? Isn't it obvious? Lord Marshal, I'm drinking. Is it time to drink? The magistrates searched, but you were drinking in front of me. Are you looking down on the magistrates in Pigeon? Did I do something wrong? Contempt for the law enforcement officer, this is wrong. But I'm just drinking. There was a chuckle all around, which made Marcus unable to hold his face, turned around and said angrily, "What are you laughing at? Who is laughing?" No one answered him. Marcus bent down again, stared at the young man's black shining eyes, and said coldly, "How about you drink in another place? I invite you." He stopped talking. But Marcus didn't see panic from him. This is not what Marcus wanted. The youths of the bottom city, even the vicious gangsters, will fear the law enforcement officer. Then let alone the ordinary Zon boy. What he wanted was his panic and fear. "Marcus, come back." A law enforcement officer who was traveling with him felt something was wrong around him. The Zon people are always united when facing the Pigeon people, but when the boy was bullied, no one stood up for him. Instead, these gangsters seemed to be watching a good show. Even this name, the law enforcement officer also saw smiles on the faces of several people. This is very abnormal. What? Facing the blocking of his teammates, Marcus got even more angry, turned around and stretched out his hand to grab it. He wanted to arrest the Zon to show the majesty of the law enforcement officer. Ugh! A sigh was accompanied by a cry of pain, and Marcus's hand was opened as soon as he stretched it out, and it quickly became red and swollen. "Damn, how dare you resist me!" Marcus lowered his body, covered his swollen wrist, and looked up at him. He stood up and was very puzzled. "I didn't do anything, I was just drinking, why did you arrest me?" "Lin Wen, punch him in the face." "Yes, give him a punch." Someone around shouted. The other 3 law enforcement officers also took steps to rush to Marcus' side to protect Marcus, but they were unsuccessful. Because the crowds that had previously separated themselves gathered together. They actually stood in front of them. On the other hand, Glenna's body, which is not inferior to Fender, stood in front of him. He lowered his head, with a big face full of flesh, and a pair of eyes like copper bells, looking at the law enforcement officer in front of him silently. His face was getting closer and closer, and through the breathing mask that filtered the poisonous gas, Gray saw the other person's eyes. Those were eyes full of fear. The law enforcement officer is afraid. Are they also afraid? Are they in the bottom city, would they be afraid too? Just because there are so many of us? But don't you have guns? You obviously have such good weapons. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. What are you doing? Do you want to resist the law? He raised his gun and aimed it at Gray's face. Resist the law? Why can the law of the upper city govern the lower city? Peaceful coexistence? Separate management? Is this the peace that the people of Shangcheng said? Is this what they call delineated management? Why did Zon have to follow Piltover's orders? Why does Zon have to be administered by Piltover? Why can't Zon be independent? Zon is Zon, and Leather City is Leather City. Why? Gray suddenly got a little angry. He suddenly understood why some people were starting to be dissatisfied with Vander. At the same time, he also understood why Vander was always sighing alone. If you have one, shoot. Gray pointed to his chest. On the open chest, he grabbed the law enforcement officer's machine gun and pointed at the disc tattoo on his chest, aiming at the position of his heart. He looked loudly at the trembling law enforcement officer in front of him, his previously calm face changed, and he said fiercely, "I'll see how many people you can kill." You. I don't understand very much. Your captain clearly told you to be quiet, but why didn't you listen to her? Ahead, the young man stood up and looked at Marcus condescendingly. Obviously you just need to wait for her to come back. We don't want to provoke you, but can you also not provoke us? But Marcus took out the gun attached to his belt with his backhand, and aimed it at him with gritted teeth. No, Marcus. A law enforcement officer surrounded by the Zon saw this scene and hurriedly opened his mouth to stop Marcus. He knew him, he had excellent grades in the police force, and he came from a middle-class family. He is likely to be Grayson's successor in the future and become the new sheriff of Pitchen, but his temper is very short-tempered. No such humiliation. Marcus, he can really shoot. Boom. And with a loud bang, sparks sputtered out, and Marcus looked ahead with anxiety and excitement. But the picture he expected did not appear. The gangsters in the tavern were not angry either. The three law enforcement officers also looked forward stupidly. The young man tilted his head slightly, but his face, which was still smiling before, turned ashen, and on the wall behind him, there was a sheet of iron pierced by Xia's bullets. It is precisely because of people like you that the relationship between Zon and Pitchen will get worse and worse. Lin Wen looked down at him calmly. The face was calm, but Lin Wen felt a fire in his heart. The fire burned more and more vigorously. It made Lin Wen feel unpleasant. Yes, that's the injustice most Zon face when confronted by a magistrate. Sometimes, the Zon people would be held down and searched even if they passed by them, and if they resisted, they would be taken to the alley and beaten. Sometimes, the Zon people will be blackmailed by them, and they will valuables against the wall, because you are a Zon, so you must have stolen the theory. They call this justice. Sometimes. Sometimes. But Lin Wen really didn't expect that they would actually shoot a teenager. A person who clearly did nothing but was drinking. Why are these injustices? Lin Wen found that he hated Pitchen more and more. Reading www.youcanshu. This kind of disgust for Pitchen was something Lin Wen had after integrating into Zon, and now, it is more and more. He heard a lot of Zon, but never a Piltover. But today, Lin Wen suddenly wanted to know, if he hurt a Pitchen person, what would happen if he killed a Pitchen person? Blue steel shadow? Impatient for Lin Wen, he took out the unknown rune fragment. Although he didn't know what kind of rune it was, as long as it was a rune fragment, it would definitely have extremely strong power. The reason why he didn't study it carefully was because Lin Wen was afraid that when he took it out, he would provoke some ruthless purple bald man. And now that Hextech has not yet appeared, King Ganjing's legs are not necessarily blades, so even if it can't be beaten, it's not that Lin Wen can't resist. Besides, the death of a law enforcement officer may not necessarily be targeted by Qing Ganjing. The reason why Jin's perverted murderer is targeted by Qing Ganjing is because he has killed many law enforcement officers, but he has not been caught. Yin made Pitchen panic, so Qing Ganjing was forced to come forward to arrest Yin. And this dead law enforcement officer, will Qing Ganjing come forward? Unconsciously, Lin Wen's hand was pinched on Marcus' neck. Marcus's face was blushed, and then, it turned white little by little. His hands clasping Lin Wen's arms became weaker and weaker, and his legs slowly froze. Enough! Until a big hand touched Lin Wen's. Vander's big face appeared, and he shook his head at Lin Wen. There was helplessness, remorse, and apology in his eyes. 10 minutes ago in the small room where Bakuba and Wei lived, Vander and Grayson were sitting facing each other. There was no smell of gunpowder, different from the arguing at the top of the tavern. Below, two people from different areas, the gangster from the bottom city, and she, the law enforcement sheriff in the upper city, the faces of the two. They all have the same expression. The atmosphere is also very quiet, it can even be said that it is a little relaxed. Both of them had some helplessness on their faces, and Fender felt a headache even more. He slammed the table with the box containing the cigarettes, and his strong thighs were also tense. He didn't actually look at it. It's so relaxing. But Grayson also had a headache. She received a death order from the congressman, and she had to catch the culprit within the time limit. Pichon will not allow dangerous and unknown weapons to appear in the hands of the Zon people. For this reason, many people have been arrested for this matter, and the lady of the Gila Man family has also been questioned. As for the initiator, he should be locked up by now, awaiting the sentencing of the council. Therefore, even if Grayson didn't know what the prisoner took, she knew very well that this matter was not a trivial matter, and it was different from the previous petty fights. Vander, you have to hand me over. The councillors have issued a death order. If I can't find someone, the next time I come, I won't be so easy to talk to. Grayson looked at Vander, said very seriously, I know, we all want to avoid trouble, but trouble always finds us. You want peace in Zon, and I also want Pichon to be stable. In the past, I could turn a blind eye to everything you did. You know, I have been doing this for a few years. We had a great time working together, but this time it's different, Vander. I know, but I can't give it to you. Vander shook his head bitterly. Although he and Grayson are not from the same city, they are on the same front. They are all people who don't want to start a war. Vander wanted Zon to get better, and Grayson also wanted Pichon to develop steadily. She even hopes that Deshan will get better. In Vander's heart, Grayson is a good sheriff. She understands the suffering of the people of Deshan, and she is willing to punish some law enforcement officers who have done wrong. On the bright side, it is Vander's credit for Zon's stability, but on the dark side, he also has the help of Upper City Leather City Sheriff Grayson. After all, in the bridge incident a few years ago, Vander was terrified, and Grayson was also terrified. Too many people died. Not everyone likes the feeling of pointing a gun at a human and killing someone with your own hands. At least, Grayson doesn't like it. Who are you? Grayson looked at Vander, who lit a cigarette, and was silent for a while before asking him. You've already guessed it, so there's no need to ask me. That's not a reason, Vander, I can't bring this answer to Parliament. Grayson picked up the box in front of Vander, pulled out a cigarette, and cut off the front of the cigar. Grayson lit the cigarette with the oil lamp. Took a deep breath, and she spit out the smoke, the mist spit on the tongue of the flame that has not been extinguished, accompanied by the suffocating air of Zon. It's ridiculous, the mist of cigars can actually smells better than the air, and this is where the Zons live. 2 boys and 2 girls with short hair, one with pink hair and one with blue hair, and the one with black and yellow hair is fat and the other thin. It is absolutely impossible to find a replacement. I saw it in the upper city today. Their magistrates say there are at least a dozen people, and there is a whole team that chases them all the way, there are a total of 6 people. Grayson bit his cigar. Vander looked at the tabletop. On this dilapidated wooden table, there were blue graffiti drawn by children, which were the images of a crooked-mouthed rabbit and a little monkey. It's a blast painting. Give me a few more days, give me a few more days. Grayson was silent for a while, and took a deep breath of his cigarette. Then, she took out something, let me know when you think about it. I'll delay you for 5 days at most. Vander waved his hand, 5 days? Enough. Grayson looked at him, as if he had guessed what the man was thinking, but as soon as Grayson was about to speak, he heard a loud bang and raised his head subconsciously. The next moment, both Grayson and Vander ran out. Then, Grayson saw a scene she won't forget. A black-haired boy who was inconspicuous in Zon stretched out his hand expressionlessly, pinched Marcus' neck, and lifted him up from the ground, but Marcus fought hard, but it was useless. The gangsters in Haiziong formed a group and stopped the 3 law enforcement officers who wanted to save people. Seeing this, Fender immediately pushed the crowd away and walked over. Lin Wen, let it go. You're done talking. Lin Wen turned his head and glanced at Fender, but he turned back immediately, and he didn't let go after listening to Fender's words, instead he still pinched Marcus by the neck. Grayson frowned and stood beside Vander. Let go. Lin Wen looked at her and then at Vander. Head of the cops, the sheriff of Upper Town, Fender said aloud. This is to tell Zhe Lin Wen, keep doing it, it's over. Of course, Lin Wen understood what Vander meant, and with a task, he smashed Marcus out, and easily threw an adult man half a head above his head several meters away, and smashed it. Turned over several tables in the tavern. The 3 law enforcement officers gathered around, and upon seeing this, someone pointed at Lin Wen angrily, you. Okay. Grayson roared, reached out and pressed the law enforcement officer's hand. Grayson looked at Lin Wen and said, take Marcus away. But Captain, you. Didn't you hear what I said? Do you want me to say it twice? Yes, Captain. After the 3 law enforcement officers carried Marcus away, Grayson looked at Lin Wen. Vander, won't you give me an introduction? With a cigarette in his mouth, Vander took a sip. He took a few steps from Grayson's side, stood behind Lin Wen, and then looked down at Grayson. Soon, a group of gang members also stood behind Vander. Vander said calmly, my second in command, the next heir to Haiziong. Grayson. I see. Grayson gave Lin Wen a meaningful look, then turned around and walked out of the Forgan Tavern with a straight back. With Lin Wen's voice, Lord Sheriff, walk slowly. After Grayson and the magistrates left, Vander looked at Lin Wen, and seeing Lin Wen was also looking at him, he smiled, with a gentle expression on his face. Vander said to the young man whose strength might have surpassed him, shoot without a mask, send with such a big fire, how did he provoke you? I was just sitting here drinking, but he shot me. Then he really deserves it, but Grayson is different. Grayson. Sheriff. Oh. Lin Wen lengthened his tone and looked at Fender with teasing eyes. Don't look at me like that, you stinky brat. With a big wave of Fender's hand, all the people in the tavern were soon gone, leaving only Lin Wen and Fender in the tavern. How are Wei and the others now? The two sat side by side in front of the bar. From the back view, Fender's back was as wide as 3 or 4 Lin Wen's. He is really as strong as a bear. But now, the bear's claws were taken away by himself. Lin Wen raised his eyes and looked above his head. There was a pair of old metal iron fists hanging there. They were old-fashioned equipment from many years ago, and they couldn't keep up with the old creations of the times. From what old Zhou Lang heard, Vander's gloves have not been worn for several years. I taught her a lesson, and now she is a lot more honest. She is a child who can listen to reason. Fandel handed Lin Wen a glass of wine. Seeing that Lin Wen was a little disgusted, he snorted heavily. I invite you to drink, but you don't want to drink, but when you're alone. Your alcohol level is too high. Is it a man? Give it to me. Lin Wen took the wine glass and took a sip to himself. Then, he turned the wine glass upside down, and 2 drops of wine foam dripped on the bar. Seeing this, Fender laughed. Lin Wen knew that Vander had something on his mind. Lin Wen has been in this world for 5 years. Old Zhou Lang is the best person for him. The next word is Fender. No, it should be said that Fender is for the entire Black Lane, and Yuyuganshu www.yuyuganshu.com for the entire Zon, all very nice people. He is like a big patriarch, and those people will respect him in places that are not under the control of Vander. Therefore, Lin Wen is very familiar with Vanderbilt. This time the matter is not so easy to solve. Vander sipped his wine and said, I originally wanted to go to Benso to talk to him, but you just came back. This time, not only did I provoke the law enforcement officers, it would be fine if it was just them, but the parliament came forward. Lin Wen looked at Vander, he looked straight ahead, holding a cup. What's your relationship with Grayson? Is it funny? Fender turned around, propped up the bar with one hand, looked at Lin Wen and said with a smile, the boss of the gang is actually with Tiazi. I made an agreement with her that I will take care of the people in the bottom city, and she will turn a blind eye to the bottom city's affairs, that is to say, Lin Wen, as a Zon person, I lead Zon. I'm human, but I've been working with the people Zon hate the most. Lin Wen was silent for a while, and then said, Wei is with me now, I have also warned Shirko and the barons, you don't have to worry about them, so if you want to come down to the city to search, you can let them search. That's it, they can't find anyone. Lin Wen said in a deep voice. Impossible. Fandal shook his head and said to Lin Wen, I won't hand Wei over to them, and I won't let them search Daiken, which can no longer be searched. Vander said freely, they dare not kill me. If I die, the bottom city will be more chaotic, and Grayson will help out. So the worst case is not to be locked in prison for a few years. Lin Wen looked at Fender, raised his eyebrows and said, Are you serious? Are you serious? Lin Wen asked repeatedly. Moreover, Lin Wen clenched his fists, trying his best not to let himself be impulsive, otherwise, Vander Lee might have flown out by now. He was afraid that he would punch Vander's big face. Hand over yourself to Pichon? What is he kidding? Lin Wen knew that Vander was not as smart as Silco, but he never thought that Vander could be so stupid. The rift between Pichon and Zon cannot be smoothed, just like water and oil, no matter how much they touch, it is impossible to fuse together. Lin Wen, this is the only way I can think of. Fender smiled, a somewhat far-fetched smile. This time it's on the council's radar, do you think they'll listen to you? If they can see what's going on with Zon, then you don't have to take someone across the bridge. Vander, in their view come on, as the initiator of that action, you who are admired by the people of Zon, of course, the sooner you die, the better. Lin Wen put his fist on the bar, stood up and looked at Vander, alone. Sitting, standing alone, but looking straight. Perhaps as you said, the pilgrims won't kill you, but you're really going to be put in jail by them, come back? What are you kidding me? How could they let you out? A casual excuse from the people in Shangcheng can keep you locked up for a few more years, don't you understand? As for your lady sheriff. Lin Wen rolled his eyes exaggeratedly, let's not talk about that. What is the sheriff who you have high hopes for in front of the congressman? Can she really have the right to speak? I know, and I understand too. Vander lit another cigarette, took a long sip, one hand of wine and one cigarette, and after breathing out the smoke ring, he said, but I have no choice but to compromise. But fortunately now I have you by my side. Without you, I don't think I would have done it, because I'm gone, they will be ready to make a move, but now you are here. You can help me protect those who have lost their lives because of me. People who have lost family members and friends, so Lin Wen, Haiziang will. Is there no other way but to compromise? Lin Wen interrupted Vander, preventing him from saying the words that were comparable to a will. He shook his head and looked at Fender. Lin Wen suddenly remembered the Shirko he had seen earlier. The two were so different, but they were so similar. The same is for Zon, and the same has rebelled against Upper City. But Vander finally chose to compromise, while Silco has been secretly planning. I went to Silco before, don't you want to know what I said to him? Hearing the words of Silco, Vander's eyes flickered a few times, and he pretended to be indifferent. My brother, what is he doing now? He is still insisting on the fight against Pichon. Lin Wen said in a deep voice. He's still like that. Vander, Silco's ideas are too extreme. You know I don't agree with his ideas, but he is right about one thing. You are, too weak now. Lin Wen said directly. Came out. Weak? Maybe. Vander did not refute Lin Wen, a big man, the boss of Haiziang, who once led the Zon people to the bridge, but he calmly accepted the name of weakness. He said aloud, Lin Wen, the boss is responsible. They all believed in me, so they trusted me, but I took them to death. I used to think that as long as I took people across the bridge, our lives would be better. But apart from dead bodies all over the place, homeless orphans, and Zon getting poorer, I got nothing. No, I got it. Vander took a sip of wine. I got the guilt for them. I've been sorry for them all my life. I'm sorry for their children, family, lover, and friends. Fender put down the wine glass, turned to look at Lin Wen, and said with a calm face, "So now I'm afraid, Lin Wen, I'm really afraid. We can't beat Pigeon, isn't it bad now?" In the sheriff there was a brief peace with the help of. "Isn't that bad? And these words I can only say to you and Benso. I've washed my hands with gold, but they are still guarding me, just looking forward to one day I can lead them to rebel against Pigeon again, but I can't bear it. It's a human life, a human life." Vander's voice became quieter. Lin Wen was silent. Is what Fender said wrong? That's right, and when everyone expected Vander to lead people to rebel against Pigeon again, no one thought about what he was thinking, including Lin Wen. Are we all waiting for his reply? Vander's cowardice and withdrawal is because he knows that he is the first responsible person for these lives. After the Day of Ashes, Vander was no longer a rebel, but now he was sandwiched between Zon and Pillow, a guardian of order on the brink of collapse. He truly loved Zon and its people. But it is precisely because of this that Lin Wen is even more angry. Because Lin Wen knows how the future will develop. As long as you don't eat books, there is absolutely no possibility of reconciliation between Zon and Pigeon, absolutely. Vander, the peace you're asking for is just a bubble. Lin Wen stared at Vander. Silco is right, only by punching the proud Pigeon people in the face and blowing their teeth out, can I gain their respect. Fender frowned. I'm from the past, Lin Wen, I've seen it, there are only losers in a war, it has no winners. Don't I want a better life for Zon? Don't I want Zon to see the sun? I want to. But we can't. Fart. There are only losers in the war. Lin Wen pointed at Fender's face. Lin Wen can understand what Vander has done for Zon. But if Vander thinks that she can survive with the sympathy of the sheriff and the law enforcement officers, this is absolutely wrong. Lin Wen disagreed with this method. Because according to Lin Wen's background memory of the alliance, the relationship between the future Zon and Pigeon will only get worse, and with the emergence of Hextech, the gap between the two sides is too big to make up. At that time, the punks were lawless in the lower city, and the punks in Midtown Plaza dared to scold the Zon people, and the Zon people could only silently squeeze into the crowd, ignoring the peepers' insults. Alchemy technology is developed. Is that the will of the Zon people? No, it's because I was forced to be helpless. Advanced alchemy technology and human transformation are just for survival. And at that time, only two people can save Zon. One is Zon's real child, Ike, and the other is Victor, who abandoned humanity and pursued divinity. But, even so, according to Lin Wen's guess, Victor would have a hard time beating Qing Gang Ying with Hex for hundreds of years. Therefore, Vander was wrong, very wrong. Vander, if there is no war, then Zon will definitely lose. Lin Wen stood on tiptoe to allow himself to be higher, so as to look down at Fender. He kept his voice calm. It was the first time that he and Vander had such disagreements. Vander, you have maintained order in Zon, but you can't change the poisonous gas in the rift, the polluted water and the rampant disease. In your dark alley, you have protected everyone very well, but the dark where's the lane? Those people behind the dark lane, aren't they from Zon? Quickly open your eyes and take a good look outside. What do you mean by being safe is letting people breathe poisonous gas? Don't you see those giant tubes? The wastewater of the upper city is flowing to Zon all the time. If this is the security you want, then what is the difference between this security and being a dog? Boom! I have my troubles. Only I know how powerful the Pigeon people are. They have weapons. What do we have? Vander slapped the table and stood up, standing in front of Lin Wen like a wall. What do we have? Weapons? Vander, we can have weapons too. I don't agree with Shirko's main battle concept, but he always remembers his ideals and is willing to give everything for it. He has now made weapons with people, which are very powerful weapons, but what about you? What have you been doing all these years? Are you a dog for Pichon? Vander looked at Lin Wen with a livid face. Vander, Zon's independence and rise depends on himself. If you want to gain the same status and development rights as Pichon, it is not wrong to look at Shirko's idea now, and Piltover must be on top. Peace can be achieved only when MPs put themselves in the shoes of pain. The reason why I don't recognize him is that he is too unscrupulous. After all, in his opinion, as long as he can avenge Piltover, he doesn't care about the lives of most people in Zon. Don't worry, I won't be with Shirko, but now, I won't be with you either. I will protect Six in my own way, protect Zon, protect you. Lin Wen picked up the wine, poured it into the glass in front of him, and then lifted it up fiercely and drank it all. Vander was wrong, but Vander was also his family. When a loved one is wrong, they must be corrected, not abandoned. Now, he wants to correct Vander's mistake. Surrender yourself? Ha, how stupid. There is always a way. Ka. The sound of bones rattled, and I don't know when, Fender had taken off his gloves and stood in front of Lin Wen, who was about to leave the tavern. He shook his stout neck, blocked Lin Wen's face, and made a boxing motion. I said, I'll take care of the magistrate's affairs, and what you have to do is to protect Wei and Bang Bang for me. You want to fight me now? What does it feel like to have alcohol on your head? That is probably the feeling that the whole world is oneself. Especially after the grandson who was obviously very powerful but pretended to be a grandson for a few years. Lin Wen has only one feeling now. Even if the little old lady Camille appeared in front of him now, Lin Wen would punch her face that might have been mechanical. See if it's her fist or her metal body. And now, just a physical body, and Vander, whose weapons are also ordinary weapons, stood in front of him? Then let me wake you up, our patriarch. Lin Wen stretched out his hands behind his back and stretched his waist. Then, he looked at the tall and strong man in front of him, and said in a deep voice, let me tell you. Vander, to survive by compromise is to perish peacefully, the truth of survival by struggle is peace. Peace is never sought, peace is fought. Boom. Boom. Dong, 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 dong. Crack. Outside the Forgan Tavern, the gangsters who were waiting for Fandel and Lin Wen to finish their conversation, who were planning to go in for a drink, suddenly panicked. They heard the voice inside. It was the sound of metal colliding, flesh colliding. Like ants on a hot pot, a group of people hurriedly opened the door of the tavern and wanted to rush in to see what happened inside. Lin Wen and Vander, the second and the eldest, what are they doing? It's not going to fight, is it? But Glay, who was the first to open the door, was smashed and flew out, and the 5 people behind him all flew out together. Gray passed out, and Vander stood up from Gray's body. First, he looked apologetically at Gray, who was lying behind him, and the few people who were under him. Fender turned his head to look forward, first squeezed his fingers on his nose, blocking one nostril, then he used his nose to breathe heavily, a cloud of black blood sprayed on the ground, and Fender snorted again, he spat out a mouthful of blood again, and he looked at the young man walking out in front of him in astonishment. Master, don't look at me with this expression, Shirko has already used it before. Fandel grinned and was kicked by Lin Wen more than 10 meters away. It felt like he was hit in the chest by a steel-making air hammer. Is this guy really that strong? Fandor got ready, and then slightly shook his right hand at Lin Wen. Lin Wen is not polite. After talking with Fender, he really had the idea of beating up Fender, and he really wanted to. And now, under the influence of alcohol, Lin Wen rushed forward regardless of what the people around him thought. 70's agility allowed Lin Wen to break through into Fender's side in just 2 breaths. Fondra couldn't keep up with Lin Wen's speed, but years of fighting experience made him quickly make the correct response. At the same time, raise your arms to the sides of your body. Boom! The iron arm was slightly sunken, and Fandor stepped back a few meters, but one of his hands also grabbed one of Lin Wen's legs. Lin Wen's whip leg that jumped high just slammed on Fendor's pair of iron arms. Hey! Lin Wen was a little surprised. Fendor also saw Lin Wen's surprise, grabbed Lin Wen's leg, and he roared, "Stinky boy, how do you think I survived? I climbed out of the dead." Turning around, Fendor grabbed one of Lin Wen's legs and was about to throw Lin Wen away, but he just threw Lin Wen out and saw Lin Wen put his hands behind him. Then, it was clear that Lin Wen's fists were still a few meters away from the ground, but the ground suddenly shattered, a depression nearly 3 meters in size appeared for no reason, and the stones were splashed in all directions, and a few even splashed into Vanders. In front of him, accompanied by Lin Wen's big foot. Lin Wen kicked Vander in the face, but finally gave up his strength. But even if he finally pulled back, Fendor pointed at Lin Wen with a puzzled look on his face. He was really puzzled. So, is that magic? No, Lin Wen is an out-and-out Zon, and he can't possibly know magic. But, if it wasn't magic, how did it do that? Lin Wen actually adjusted his body in the air, and at the same time ejected back and gave him a kick? With such a puzzlement, Fandor stalked over, and before fainting, he scolded Lin Wen, "Stinky boy, you really kicked." Looking at Fendor, who had passed out, Lin Wen, who had been active for a while, was also a little sober. After fighting Vander, Lin Wen actually found that he felt very comfortable. At the same time, Lin Wen was also convinced. For a long time, he has been protecting Wei and Bakuba, helping Vander to keep the order of the bottom city. After a long time, Lin Wen, who wears a mask, is also called a trench magistrate by some barons. And this time is actually no different, this time is the same is to protect Wei and Bang Bang. But the difference is that this time, Lin Wen decided to do something. "Sevika!" Lin Wen called out to the crowd. Then she saw a stinky woman walking out. She looked at Lin Wen, then at Vander on the ground, and at the muddy ground that was half a meter indented. Although Sevika's expression was very cold, but the corners of her eyes were twitching fiercely, which revealed her true thoughts at this time. "Drag Vander back, and when he wakes up, you help me tell him that he lost. Since he is a loser, he must listen to the winner." Sevika and another person held up Vander, but she looked at Lin Wen again. "What did you and Vander talk about? Want to know?" Lin Wen raised his eyebrows. Sevika and Gray are the few people Lin Wen pays attention to because they are both very strong. Especially Sevika, as a woman, she is extremely capable of fighting. Before Lin Wen, when something happened in the Black Alley, the people sent by the Black Hound, Vander, were all Sevika. This also proves her combat effectiveness. She is likely to be the third person who can fight in Haixiang. Of course, Vander is the second best player. And the first is of course Lin Wen. Now in the whole of Zon, no one can beat Lin Wen. Proud.jpg. But I won't tell you. Lin Wen pushed Sevika away and walked out with a smile. "You." Sevika glanced at Lin Wen coldly, and then, with another person, brought the unconscious Vander back to the tavern. "Lin Wen, why did you and Fender fight? My god, what was your move just now?" A group of people chased Lin Wen and asked him. Lin Wen saw the person who asked him about his tricks. It was a guy with exaggerated hairstyle and exaggerated hair color. "Want to learn? Miss. Run 15 kilometers a day, do 100 sit-ups, 100 push-ups, 100 squats, and 100 pull-ups. After 3 years, you can catch up with me." "Real?" Lin Wen looked at him. It was a very thin pork ribs. "Of course, at least it will definitely make you stronger." UU reading www.uugonshu.com. It's not good, it's not good, it's not good. The door of the broken square iron house was opened, and the pink-haired girl lowered her head with a displeased expression on her face. In front of her was a panting, dark-skinned little guy who looked shorter than Bang Bang. He has short white hair, and his features are immature, but he is smeared with a little white. Little one, what are you making a fuss about? I knew you were here. Hey, little one. A person appeared behind Wei, and she looked at him with joy. Why are you only here now? I thought you would come to me as soon as I came back. No, it's not good, it's not good. Come ahead and talk about it. Wei pulled him in. Craig saw him and smiled happily. Ike, why are you here? Hey, yes, Bang, your brother beat your dad. What? Wei was stunned, unable to react. Ike grabbed Wei's hand and shook it vigorously. Lin Wen knocked Fender unconscious. Wei turned pale in shock, grabbed Ike in turn, and asked him loudly, why does this happen? And Ike suddenly stopped. A look of disgust appeared on his face. Recalling the words he overheard, he didn't know whether he should say it or not. That's bad for Vander, and it's proof that Six has done something wrong. But, with the last bite of his teeth, Ike still spoke to Wei. Because compared to Lin Wen, Wei is his boss. By the time Lin Wen returned to the tin room, the wine was completely sober. I beat Fender before, but now I think about it. I seem to be a little impulsive, and I lost face in front of so many people. After all, the seconding command of the team beat the boss or something. However, Lin Wen didn't regret it, because that guy Fender should have beaten him hard at that time. He always looked like a big boss, and he always did things like this. It's not so much that he was discussing with Lin Wen before, but rather that he was spitting bitterness at Lin Wen. When Lin Wen suggested that he was wrong, he changed from the bitter-speaking Vander to the patriarch Vander. Is it true that no one in the Black Alley can beat you? It's just to give you face. Lin Wen shook his head and opened the door. After entering the room, Lin Wen felt something was wrong. Xiao Bang Bao didn't rush to his lap for the first time, and Wei was also sitting on the sofa with his hands folded under his chin. That movement was exactly the same as that of Vanderbilt. Craig and Milo stood behind Wei, like guardians left and right. Craig looked at Lin Wen apologetically, while Milo simply didn't look at Lin Wen. What are you doing? Lin Wen asked, and then, he saw the little white-haired boy hiding in the corner. Ike, you guy. When he saw him, Lin Wen understood everything at once. Seeing Lin Wen looking at him, Ike tightened his and recalled some kind of pain, and immediately stood up straight. Ike gave Lin Wen a salute. Brother, it was Wei who asked me to tell. Instead of talking about this, how did you overhear my conversation with Vander? Lin Wen rubbed his eyebrows with a headache. The moment he saw little Ike, Lin Wen understood why they were in this atmosphere. Ike is smart, and very thief. In the Black Alley generation, there is no news that Ike can't inquire about. His strange little inventions are all over the Black Alley, and sometimes, even brought to Lin Wen. Convenient. He is really a very smart guy. But, how dare he? How dare he use his little inventions on me? Dare to eavesdrop on his conversation with Vander. Benso didn't teach him, did he? Is you're ready to be beaten? Lin Wen grinned and walked towards Ike, rubbing his fists. Wei. You promised to help me. Ike started running up to Wei. Lin Wen. Wei rushed in front of Lin Wen, raised her head to look at Lin Wen, and stretched out her hand. She poked Lin Wen's chest with her fingers, and said a sentence, speaking as fast as a cannonball. Why did you hit Vander? Although I don't need Vander to wipe my ass, because I'm no longer a child, I will take responsibility for what I do wrong. But Vander is not wrong. He's doing it for my own good. You beat him like this, how do you let the people outside the Black Alley see him? Are you guys breaking up? What are you talking about? I'm not talking nonsense. How can you hit Vander? He's my father. In short, it's wrong for you to hit him. Then he hit me, right? Hey! Vander didn't seem to want to hit me either. Lin Wen shook his head, quickly grabbed Wei's hand, and rubbed the girl's hair with the other hand. Lin Wen raised his voice and said fiercely, "Who allowed you to talk to me like this?" Seeing this scene, Bakuba was a little nervous, holding a blue rabbit character doll that Lin Wen gave him, standing there not knowing who to help. But judging from the fact that her eyes were always on Wei, she was more inclined towards her sister. The old-fashioned Milo simply walked to the door step by step, then, he chose not to help, and he didn't stand in the house. He was going to stand outside the house to eavesdrop. Craig is not surprised, Wei, who is short-tempered and straightforward, and Lin Wen, who always complains about the fenders but actually protects and manages everyone. Ha! When she was with him, it was easy to get into a fight. You! It's obviously your fault. What did I do wrong? Lin Wenkai laughed. Gently pushed Wei, and then pressed the sofa, with one hand on her shoulder, and after letting her sit on the sofa honestly, Lin Wenkai said again, "What? You still want to beat me? I taught you to fight, let alone Vander can't beat me, you want to beat me? Wei, wait another 100 years for you. Also, who told you that Vander did the right thing?" Wei sat there angrily and retorted, "Of course I also know that what he did is wrong, I will take care of my own affairs, and I will do it myself if I surrender." Snapped. "Oh, what are you doing, Lin Wen?" Wei covered his forehead and cried out in pain. Lin Wen put away his knife, leaned down slowly, and looked at the girl. "Wei, was I too gentle before, or are you rebellious?" Seeing Lin Wen seemed to be really angry, Wei immediately stopped talking. "Of course I have my reasons for fighting Fender, and there is a breakup or something. Do you want me to break up with Fender?" "I do not." "Sit me down." "Yes." Wei put his hands in front of his legs, sat up straight, became obedient and stopped talking while looking ahead. Little Ike saw this scene behind Craig and thought to himself something bad. Although Wei always plays with him, he is his boss, but Wei also has a boss. Isn't Wei's boss Lin Wen? I didn't offend the boss, but it did offend the boss's boss. Ike, I'm done. When Vander couldn't solve Wei, Lin Wen would come forward. For some reason, Fender never hit Wei, but Lin Wen was different. If Wei really did something wrong, a big one, then Lin Wen would really hit her. And her fighting skills, in addition to being honed on the street, were more developed by Lin Wen. Now it's not a problem for her to fight 2 or 3 gangsters of the same age. This not only proves Wei's fighting talent, but also describes from the side that Lin Wen was ruthless when he hit her. Do you know what your problem is now? Yes. Tell me where you are wrong. My mistake is that I shouldn't be so impulsive. I should have listened to your explanation first, brother. Looking up, Wei pretended to give Lin Wen a pitiful look. Lin Wenkai laughed, and pointed his index finger on Wei's forehead, clicked, and said something, just like Wei's previous point on his chest. Explain? Let me explain to you. What you said earlier was correct, but what did you say later? Lin Wen tapped the belly of his finger on the eyebrows, causing Wei's little head to tilt back. Sitting here gives me a good reflection. Click again. Surrender? You turned yourself in. If you don't dare to leave this house without my permission, just wait for you. Craig. Milo. Lin Wen called out again. Yes, sir. Here, big brother. Milo ran into the room quickly, for fear that he would be reprimanded by Lin Wen for being slow. Except for the explosion, no one of you is allowed to enter this room from today. And Ike. Brother, say it. Ike stood up straight. Give me a good look at this room, this time things can pass like that, otherwise. Ike shuddered and responded again and again. In the end, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com flicked Wei's head with a little force, and Lin Wenkai stood up. The tone slowed down. Lin Wen said, "I promised you, I will solve all this." Wei nodded, "I know you will." "Then why did you do that? You don't believe me." "Of course I believe you, I just think it's all my fault." "Of course it's your fault." Wei nodded, "So I think I should take on all this, I've grown up too." Ike told me. Lin Wen teased Wei, "You're only 13 years old, so what's your growth?" "You." After being teased by Lin Wen, Wei opened his mouth and said, "But you have already started to help Vander at my age, so why can't I do it? Even if you've grown up, I won't allow you to do this." "Why? You can't always be like this." "Lin Wen, I know you want to protect me, but I've really grown up and I can make my own decisions." Wei raised his hands and danced, "You protect the explosion. It's okay to explode, I can protect me and I. Lin Wen stretched out his hand to cover her mouth and shook his head. "You are also my sister." Wei blinked, then turned his head. Well, she really lost to this guy. Always with a gentle look on his face, always pretending to be weak without a sense of existence. But when something went wrong, the elders who acted like Vander, began to act confidently. Not only do you control yourself in these matters, but even some trivial matters in life, such as standing and sitting, will control yourself. Elder brother, elder brother.